After Rowena female ejaculated all over me while my penis was still in her vagina, and then she went cross-eyed, and then I came inside her vagina so much that I knew I definitely got her pregnant, and that broke her mind, and she said oh my god many times uncontrollably, and then she said oh that felt so good. Oh, that felt so good, and then I continued having sex with her, and then she started practically growling at me while having sex with me, just like all my other wives did after having sex with me for many hours, and then finally she got tired and fell asleep in my arms, and I spooned with her while holding her gently around the waist, and then she said I feel pregnant, and then I said because you are silly, and then I smiled at her like a pervert, and then she smiled at me like a pervert too, and she said you like getting women pregnant don't you, and then I said yes ma'am I do, and then I rubbed her belly and kissed it, and then she said oh I'm sore, I'm not used to this kind of attention, and then I said oh please Rowena, I gave you the powers of an archangel, you're not fooling anyone, and then she said my human form still feels pain silly and I'm still human, and then I said yeah no, and then I started giving her oral pleasure for 4 hours, and then she said okay maybe just one more time, and then she had sex with me one more time, and then finally we walked out, and then Amara said done already. It took a lot longer with me, but I'm not mortal at all, so I needed about 4 million years with him inside his time chamber, and then I felt something. Amara is definitely pregnant with my children, and then I said interesting, and then she said I've held it off as long as I could Mike, but soon you and I will have to go to a dark void so I can have our babies, and then I asked her can't you have them here, and then she said oh no honey you don't know anything about my kind, it will be like a nuke going off, so you will definitely have to take me to a universe that no one will miss, or you will have to take me to the big empty, and then I asked her are you sure honey, and then she said yes I'm definitely sure, and then I said I've been wanting to talk to you about something Amara if you don't mind, and then she sighed and put down her newspaper and she said okay let's go in your room, and then we went to my room and I asked Amara so I've been meaning to ask you about Chuck, did you and him have sex, and then she said yes I had sex with him many times mainly because I wanted children also, and then I asked her what do you mean you wanted children, and then she said I am actually responsible for making the Leviathans and the angels and archangels, and then Chuck made all of you humans, and that angered me and Lucifer, but none of the angels ever knew I was their mother, and I want to keep it that way, and I asked why, because you do realize that if they knew you were their mother that they would also bow down to you. Amara, you need to tell them at some point, they need to know that they aren't all sunshine and rainbows. Amara, they think they are pure and born just from God. They think they are perfect and that they can do no wrong. I don't understand why you won't tell them. I mean, do you even care that your children think they don't have a mother? And then she said it's not for you to tell them husband, and then I said how interesting, I think you're scared, and then I laughed a bit, and then she laughed too, and then she stopped laughing immediately and she said I will tell them when I'm ready, and then she turned around to walk out the door, and then I said wait a minute, and I quickly took all my clothes off and I said stay a while, and I started massaging her shoulders gently, and I said I want to give you a Nuru massage like before, and then she okay I definitely love the sound of that, and then I gave her a full body massage for about 12 hours, and then she finally said that's enough now, I want something else, and then she started having sex with me again, and she started riding my big 12-inch penis, and then she said oh yes baby. And I started gently massaging her boobs with my big hands, and then she started sucking my finger, and then she continued riding me for many hours like usual, and then finally I switched positions with her, and I switched to the missionary position, and then doggy style position, and then back to reverse cowgirl position, and unlike all the other women I don't have to hold back on Amara. She's very powerful, and she also did the Hercules method training, so yes I don't hold back on her much when I'm having sex with her, meaning I move faster, I don't do anything too crazy with her. Even though she's immortal, I sexually stimulate her better, I can vibrate my body and all that, and I can thrust her better without killing her. And then I said I love having sex with you Amara because I don't have to hold back so much, and then she said oh yes baby please keep doing that, and I kept moving faster while screwing her, and then she ejaculated.